Hi, this is Brian Powers. Welcome everyone to the webinar on emerging technologies in emergency management. We have three speakers today to share with you their knowledge, information, and experience. First is Chell from Draganfly. He's Chief Executive Officer and President. Our second speaker is from the University of Maryland Global Campus, Justin Baumgartner, a retired police officer. He's on his faculty at UMGC as a collegiate faculty member. He has unique experience as a law enforcement officer standing up a drone program for a Colorado Police Department, and he will just discuss his experiences there. And then finally, I have myself, Brian Powers. I'm the program director for emergency management, Homeland Security, and intelligence. I spent 26 years in the military and have extensive experience in working counterterrorism, intelligence, and emergency management issues. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today, and we look forward to your questions and hope this benefits your quest for knowledge. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Brian Powers. I'm the program director at University of Maryland Global Campus for Homeland Security, Intelligence, and Emergency Management. A little about my background. I'm a 26-year Air Force veteran, worked in intelligence, retired in 2004. I worked in the private sector as a strategic planner at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and at the Defense Intelligence Agency. I came into academia about 2012, and I was a full-time associate professor at the National Intelligence University, and I've been at UMGC since 2017. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. We're going to cover today emerging technologies in emergency management. We're going to start out with covering the basics, where we are now, how we got there, and then what the key technologies have been over the last 100 years. I won't go over each one individually, so we won't be here that long. And then we'll go ahead and go some takeaways. The format will be that I will talk about particular technologies and briefly what their applications are. But the takeaway is for holistically for you to get an idea of how much technology is out there and what the basics are. There's a lot there. Understanding them is very important. So we're going to aim to increase your technology proficiency today. The main topics will be the framework where we're at now, evolution of communications technologies, which are pretty fascinating, associated IT issues, cybersecurity and threats, the importance of sensors, particularly satellite technology and drones, tech enablers, the importance of partnerships, and a conclusion. So that'll be it. So let's go ahead and introduce the main topic right now. So where we are right now with emerging technologies in emergency management is like most sectors in today's society. We're all over the place. There's technologies being thrown at us all the time. The important thing is to understand those technologies and apply them to the requirements. The main requirements for emergency management is preparation, planning, resilience, and response. And there's a lot of technology that helping to do that, and it's increasing all the time. Examples are telephone, radio, mobile communications, Wi-Fi, satellites, messaging, internet, and so forth. You're all very familiar with that. So the key takeaway first, there's two key takeaways here. The first one is communications. Communications is what emergency management has relied on from probably one of the most important technologies around. Looking at history, I'm a history major, so I like to look at the past to see how we got to the present. And you can see that emerging technologies have been going on since the mid-19th century. It really started to take off. The importance of communications, as I mentioned before, it went from the telegraph, the wireless telegraph, to the transatlantic cable, telephones, radios, satellites. The 911 system is part of the communication system, fiber optics, mobile cell phones, which are now computers, and the internet. All that has, and you can see from the dates, they're not as recent as we thought, but we've built on those technologies to where we are today. The 21st century framework for emergency management, because of these technologies, has been important. There's a lot of new technologies that have been coming in, and the important takeaway from here too is that a lot of the applications have come from other sectors. It's not necessarily being developed solely for emergency management, and that's what's made this very dynamic. What's been going on for the last 20 years, the last 2 decades, more or less. The important part of it is that energy consumption. You got to have the power to operate these systems. You have to have the bandwidth in order to communicate, and you have to have the computing power to analyze and to collect and share all that data. The next takeaway is information technology, and we're going to talk about the different aspects of that coming up right now. So the fundamentals is that where we are right now is information sharing is where it's at. That's what we want to do. We want to be able to share that information, and the important thing is at all echelons, at the strategic national level, at the operational level, and at the tactical level. That's quite important because all of those different sectors need to interact because they all have information that needs to be shared, and they provide a lot of warning and a lot of situational awareness. An example of that is edge computing. It enables new methods of gathering, analyzing, and redistributing data. That's the name of the game. That's the process of these new technologies, and there's different ways of doing that. Cloud computing has become more and more important, and even that's evolved since its origination. Use cases are cloud-driven digital tools such as telemedicine, symptom reporting, mobile pattern analysis, and sensor data infusion are all important. You can see that in the schematic at the bottom there. But the important thing is real-time computing of information and sharing that information. And that's what cloud computing. And you're able to, if you lose your connectivity, you have an ability to store that information for later on, and at the same time to share that information to multiple users. Open data and analysis. This is becoming more and more important, and we'll talk about the specific technologies with that. But advanced data analytics are becoming important. So it's not only collecting the data, which where we were about 2 decades ago, we're now having a capability to analyze that data because there's so much of it coming in. So predictive analytics are important, supply chain logistics, and the ability for response teams to understand the natural hazards that are taking place and to be able to respond versus react. And that comes with all these different technologies that we have available. Let's go into more specifics. The buzzwords today, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence and mythological definitions can do anything, but it cannot do anything, but it can do a lot of things. And understanding what it can do is important. Leveraging AI and machine learning is important to analyze big data. Just think about it. There's so many different sources of information. You can't keep track of that. Just look at your emails every day that are coming in. Now, looking at all these different sensors and the ability to collect that information and to broadcast it out, it has to be processed faster than the human mind. And that's where artificial intelligence comes in. It also can run models of the information so that we can do better planning and emergency management, such as floods. It also can give us predictive analytics based on the data it's collecting. What's social media saying? What's the crowdsourcing of where's the location of individuals? Digital applications that could optimize disaster predictions. We've come a long way with that, and we're continuing to do so. The other one is Internet of Things, which is quite important also because that embeds sensors and software together. So the sensors aren't only collecting, but the software is able to take that information. And for example, mapping, which we'll discuss briefly, is a good example of that. So you'll be able to take that data, and then you can use the software to display it in multiple areas. And you can also shape it the way you want it to. Use cases as our Internet of Things networks transmit into emergency responders about a car accident. And what that can send out, again, to multiple users is what's the location, what's the vehicle registration, what's the severity of the accident, what's the exact time. It can identify the damage, the weather, and so forth. It provides a lot of immediate information to those that need it. Responding to an accident would be law enforcement and would also be the emergency responders. Two different entities altogether. They all can collect this. They can all get access to the same information. That's a big game changer. Blockchain. I had some trouble understanding blockchain because I thought of block as in blocking something. I was like, why would you want to block information? Well, that's not what it is. It's blocking the information together. It's putting it together so that it can be processed and it can be analyzed. It's encoded data. It coordinates more efficient disaster responses. It allows emergency service to automate decision-making, particularly in fast-moving, and puts them into more of a responsive mode than in a reactive mode. And it also decentralized information storage, so there's more access to it. Quantum computing, we hear a lot of things about quantum computing coming about. It's in its early stages. It's supposed to be able to move information a lot faster, be able to analyze it a lot faster. One of the threats it's going to have is that our encryption devices the quantum computing can probably get around it, and there's a threat to that, to protecting information and privacy. But it will provide a powerful fork forecasting tool to mitigate future natural disasters. You're going to see more and more of that going on. You're going to see it on the Weather Channel. You're going to see it in responses and planning. And within your sector, if you work in the emergency management, Homeland Security, intelligence, this is going to be a great aid. And it's going to be, at the same time, understanding it will be quite important. Cybersecurity and threats, we all have them. And the emergency management sector is no different. The same threats that we have protecting our personal information, our financial information, and so forth, it's no different. At the same time, there's natural threats. Think about what emergency management does. They respond to natural disasters and physical security threats. Power outages. Without the power, you really can't do a lot with what you have. So when we talk about the threats, it's not just cyber, it's the natural and physical security threats, and it's important to keep that in mind. However, having a culture of cyber preparedness is quite important, both personally and professionally. Now we're going to go on to the next area, and that's the sensors. And I put sensors and communications together because the sensors can collect the information, but without the communications, it can't do it. I started working out in drones back in the mid-1990s, and that's what we found out. Communications was probably our weakest capability, and that's why you see a lot of communications being developed. The sensors themselves have come a long way. They're smaller, they're faster, they're more refined, and they're more accurate and exact. And the communications has the ability to disseminate that information to multiple users and to share that information. Satellite early warning's been going on for quite a while. It goes back to the early 1950s. Global positioning satellites provides precise navigation. Every one of us has it on our phones. We couldn't get around without it. But it does give us location tracking. It monitors effects, it coordinates response. And the latest thing out now is instead of having these large satellites in space, they're called smaller constellations. The Starlink disaster response system that's been put out, that's being used quite a bit in Ukraine. It's been adapted for that use. But that's going to revolutionize the ability to have access to satellite information. It's also going to lower the cost. In addition to that, we still rely on GPS systems for navigation. We have electro-optical, and we have, and last week we had, in the second webinar, we had quite a bit of discussion about geographic information systems, GIS. They covered it very, very well. But it also, the takeaway for this is, again, it can provide mapping and overlay mapping in real time. A lot of the NGOs in that side of the sector, they rely more and more on this information because there are normally in remote areas, particularly in third world nations where they don't have the infrastructure. Okay, in addition to that, we have drones. Again, the takeaway there is that drones are indigenous. You can be at the lowest level, and we listened to Justin talk about at his level when he was starting out at a local police department. You can see they have their own capability. You don't have to go up echelon and try to buy the information or tap into it. But multiple sensors are really, really important, and it's come a long way. Remote sensing real time. I found it fascinating that you can go by a light post in a street and it's not just a light post anymore. It can put multiple sensors, and it can also collect information on temperature, weather, and so forth. And it also can have a camera that can monitor 24 hours a day information on the general area itself. So again, it can give situational awareness to what's taking place. For example, a fire department reacting to a fire can tap into these along the way. They also can have the lights change. This has been around for a while in order to be able to proceed through to the route. 3D printing, probably one of the most underwhelmed, but probably one of the most important, particularly for supply chain. The military has made a lot of use of this, and so have third world nations. When I talk about the military, it's those that are on deployments and don't have access to some of the parts. Very, very innovative use of this. Very, very important, and it's going to be quite important, particularly at the local level, and the ability to use that. But it's cheaper, and it can do a lot of things. An example is that they're actually putting shelters together using plastic 3D printed parts, and they can also put in different parts, like, for example, tools, enclosures, tent stakes, things like that, on the spot. The other part is alternate reality, virtual reality. The key takeaway from that is training. It can put the responders virtually into an environment, and they can recreate wildfires, earthquakes, civil disturbances, things like that. Very, very important to be able to do that. That's coming a long way, and it's going to be quite important in use. It's expensive, it's a little slow now, but like everything else, as it gets developed, it'll get better, faster, and cheaper. And that's the name of the game. Partnerships. So if someone else is willing to help you, why would you turn them down? Example of this is National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. They've been flying satellite reconnaissance for way before I was even born, back into the 70s and into the 50s and 60s, actually. What they do now is they collect that data and they're able to share that, and they have a very good relationship with FEMA and into the lower echelon units, but they can repurpose what before was intelligence collection and be able to use it into the emergency management sector. Another one is, we talked about cyber threats before. DHS, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, they provide funding, again, to more local units in order to be able to keep up with their cybersecurity. So these are the partners that we want to be able to have that say, we have the ability, we're willing to share it with you. In the case of CISA, we're willing to help you fund so you can protect your cybersecurity threats and your networks. We're almost done. Wearable technologies. This is the real takeaway now. So instead of seeing a responder now, just having on the basic protection apparatus, it's a lot more than that. We're talking about mobile and wireless communication technology, robust sensors and devices. They're able to have, for example, firefighters can use internet connected embedded technologies for biometric sensors, so they can send out information to their to the other responders on what their condition is and how, in case they're in distress itself. Paramedics can have access to information. They can provide information on a patient en route to a hospital, and they can also get information from the hospital itself on how to deal with the patient. This is not that new, but again, with a lot of technologies we talked about with analytics and so forth, that's going to improve the situation and the process itself. Last slide. With all this presentation we did, read the fine print. It's not cheap. That's one of the first things that I looked at afterwards. And the lower you are in the echelon, you're talking about rural areas, there isn't a whole lot of money out there all the time. That's going to be an issue. It's always been an issue. It's going to be no different. A lot of this information that I covered, a lot of these technologies that are out there, depending on where you are in the food chain, it's going to be your ability to be able to leverage that information itself. Communications are always going to be important, and without the communications, we can't get the information to the users themselves. But we are going to be seeing is sharing that information, and in the way ahead with a lot of the technologies I showed earlier in the presentation, the analytics will really be the game changer. That's to be able to take the information, not only for planning, but also for real time. And that is the situational awareness, so that you're not in a reacting mode, you're in a response mode. And that's the name of the game. If I learned anything in the military is you want to be in the response mode, not in the react mode. You want your adversary to be in the react mode, but you want to be in the response mode. Even though I can't see you and interact with you, you've been a great audience today, and I do appreciate your time and letting me share my information with you. So thanks very much. Yeah, it's a great question. One area that they've really done exceptionally well has been in the drones. They've been interacting quite a bit with the FAA has really reached out to the private sector and to the emergency managers to see how they can best support them. Because example of that is deconflicting the airspace and also beyond visual line of sight. That's a hard thing to do because the operator cannot see the vehicle itself, the drone. In that area, the government's done exceptionally well. In fact, they've had to bring the Congress along. They developed the policies, they run the pilots, they have the information, they have the data. It's moved quite quickly. On the other side of it, with the IT stuff, it's a lot different because it's so much more complicated. It's harder to understand. So it is taking a little bit more time to be able to do that. So the answer is, as is always way is, it depends. But unfortunately, it does take a long time, but maybe that's not a bad thing either because it's complicated. He's been a technology entrepreneur for over 30 years and spent his career growing diverse collection of emerging technologies into revolutionary companies. Draganfly was founded by him in 1998. It's an award-winning industry leader serving the public safety, agriculture, industrial inspections, security mapping, and surveying markets. Draganfly has been a leader in the professional drone industry, supporting its clients with enterprise drone solutions, including professional UAV services, custom software, and engineering services. Welcome, Cam.
Well, my name is Cameron Chell. I'm CEO and co-founder of Draganfly Technologies. Thank you very much to the University of Maryland Global Campus and the Frederick Community College for having us here today. We're honored and pleased that hopefully we can contribute in some positive way to your program. So thank you again very much. Draganfly is very close to 25 now, and we're I think hopefully one of the most trusted names in the UAV business today. So from a company perspective, we are a rapidly growing company. We've remained a relatively small company for the last 25 years, very focused on technology, very specific innovations, particularly into public safety. And but the whole drone industry is now really at an inflection point. Many people have thought that the drone industry was at an inflection point, at several different times over the last 20 years. But the reality is the drone industry is now just at that inflection point, primarily, and actually 90% of the reason it's at this point right now is because regulation is catching up to technology. And what a lot of people, don't really appreciate about the drone industry is that this is the aerospace industry. We're putting aircraft in the air. So the need for regulation for, obviously around safety, proper commercial use, public safety, proper servicing, all the rest of it is paramount. And so it just takes a long time. There's a lot of constituents involved in order to start to fly unmanned devices in the air, regardless of their size. So we're really excited about where the industry is going today and look forward to being part of it moving forward. Draganfly has, we work hard every year to come up with something new, something groundbreaking, something a first in the industry. And this is a bit of our culture. So if we think all the way back to the late 90s, we actually introduced the first quadcopter to the commercial market. In 2001, we put the first video on a quadcopter commercially. The first one that was actually doing self-connecting positioning, stabilized video, the first drone that was federally approved for flight with public safety departments. And the list, things that today seem very, very simple, but 20 years ago were quite groundbreaking. And that leads, all the way up until about a year and a half ago, we introduced some significant machine vision and AI onto our drones. So our drones on search and rescue missions can do things like read heart rate, respiratory rate, blood pressure, blood oxygen levels. Really, the advancement of the technology of drones has been exponential. And just in this last year, we introduced 3 new products into the market that really helped the drone industry propel to an entirely new level. So one of our cultural crowning moments was that in 2013, a Draganfly drone was actually credited as the first drone that officially saved a human life, and it was on a search and rescue mission. And today that drone sits on permanent display in the Smithsonian. And this is part of the history leading up to this, and certainly since then is really a cultural icon for us internally. And as such, we're very, very focused on public safety initiatives, and that's been a primary market for us. So we've sold probably 15,000-ish drones to hundreds of different sheriff's departments, federal agencies, U.S. Marshals, Border Patrol, those types of organizations, and continue to be proudly in service to those organizations. I'll just give an overview here, not to make a commercial, if you will, but We really, in terms of our products and services, we have our airframes and sensors on the far left side of your screen. And so these range from smaller quadcopters. We don't do prosumer or consumer type devices. Everything we do is industrial or public safety or military service. We don't do kinetic, so we don't do firing systems or things like that. But we certainly build drones that are used in military service for things like blood delivery on the battlefield, or humanitarian delivery, or reconnaissance, or search and rescue, or landmine detection, as an example. We have a very unique medical services drone. You see that second from the top left there. That drone in particular, which I'll just highlight a little bit, the box on top of that drone is actually temperature managed. So what that means is that it can, for 24 hours, can carry things like pharmaceuticals or EpiPens or insulin or those types of, or blood, those types of things that require refrigeration. And it's a very unique setup on that. It actually does it without a battery packet, so it doesn't drain the battery from actually the drone operation. We've got a full range of search and rescue drones. The Tango that you see there is a fixed wing, high altitude reconnaissance drone. And as we get down a little further there, we even produce our own LiDAR systems. And again, the reason that we're starting to produce some of our own sensors and such is that nothing collects data better than a drone. Like, it's just, it's an aerial platform, has an incredible battery capacity, and you can put sensors on this thing where literally in 5 minutes you could do, a detailed LiDAR, a detailed survey and mapping. You could do environmental monitoring for anything from depleted uranium to, radiation to bee pollen to, you obviously you get all your visuals, your thermals, and in 5 minutes you can collect more data about a square kilometer than you could in weeks and months of people being on the ground. So that data collection is being recognized as a potential security risk as well. It's just so rich. And so there's been a lot of regulations that have been put in place to start to manage, what manufacturers can sell to what type of customers. So we see foreign national organizations, in particular, Chinese at this point, which are being restricted in terms of who they can sell to or who can buy that type of stuff. So as a North American manufacturer, we're afforded the luxury to be able to sell into these agencies still. And we're seeing that same restriction now being put on sensors. We have a full flight services. These are the 6 primary areas that we do flight services, and each one of them, we have some sort of strategic differentiation or some sort of compelling value proposition to our customer. As an example, in the mining space, we have an AI software that after we fly our mag missions, our magnetometer missions, we apply the all from similar geological formations around the world and compares that data with our magnetometer data, and actually at the end of the day spits out drilling targets or prospecting targets for our customers. So again, we're an organization that we recognize the value of the airframe, but ultimately what customers want is generally the value of the data. They want what the drone does, not necessarily the drone. So we really focus on a total solution for our customers. And that leads to our AI and data solutions. And so, we may be flying a forestry mission, and that might be a LiDAR mission for a forestry company. And in that LiDAR mission, you can pull things like, inventory count, yield reserve, disease analysis, water table analysis, topographical analysis for roads, and things like that. It's terabytes of data that we deliver back to the customer. And so more and more what we're seeing and what we're encouraging is for those customers to house that data with us. So kind of like being an Amazon of the drone data and helping manage all the security permissions and access and really securing and locking down that data, that terabytes of data for those organizations. And we'll continue to do more and more of that. And then, as I mentioned, we continue to push things on the sensors using software. So, it's one thing to have an RGB camera, of which there are lots of different manufacturers out there, but in fact, we apply our machine vision software onto those cameras so that in our search and rescue missions, we can do things like read heart rate, respiratory rate, and blood pressure, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's again, such a massive area where the drone industry really is cutting some new leading edge innovation in the fact that it's taking this existing equipment and applying AI and really good software engineering into it in order to be able to provide even greater and greater results. So in terms of the capabilities that we have, if you look at that bottom left corner, that is really, toy drones, right? So this is, consumer and manual operation only. And if you look at the top right corner, that would be your very high-end military type of drones. And so you can see kind of where we play. We're in that industrial and that light military type space where where we're using things like machine vision, we're using AI. The drones that we are producing aren't small consumer or prosumer type drones. Right? We do have our Commander 2 drone, which can fold up into a backpack. But really our primary drone, which is the Commander 3 XL, is about the size of a coffee table, right? And it's about a $25,000 unit, and you need to be a skilled operator to run this, not just from your piloting skills, but your how you understand what industry you're serving. So a pilot that's servicing a search and rescue mission is very different than the pilot skill that's required to fly a demining mission or a pilot that's flying a pipeline inspection mission. So these are all considerations as people are looking at career opportunities. And the drone industry, though there will be more and more autonomous flights and more automated flights. The pilots in those and the pilots' knowledge of the industry that they're working in and the functions of the actual drones that they are working with and those sensors will be paramount. So when they talk about 100,000 new piloting jobs in this industry, it's not just going to be people on the ground working joysticks. It's going to be people in network operations centers who have very highly skilled expertise in software, in aerospace management, and in the industries that they're working in. Just to highlight a couple of products here quickly, this is our Draganfly heavy lift drone on the far left, and that can carry about 70 pounds, not quite, but just under 70 pounds of capacity, can fly for 55 minutes. So this is a great drone for doing deliveries. And we see it being utilized in all kinds of different industrial applications. The middle drone there is likely the most efficient drone in the market today. That's always a one-upsmanship that's going on in the world. But this particular drone can carry about 23 pounds of payload. It only weighs 22 pounds. And so the advantage of that is that it is under 55 pounds of weight. And so under 55 pounds means that you don't have to have special exemptions to fly it. You still have to have your commercial drone piloting Part 107 license and follow all the rules, but you don't have to get special exemptions to then go and do additional to do additional work with it. And then and there's about 17 different payloads that can fit onto that particular drone. So all kinds of different sensors and such. And then on the far right side, that is our LiDAR. And I just highlight that a little bit. So it's our own LiDAR system. That's a LiDAR. The sensitivity of that LiDAR used to have to fit onto a helicopter, just to give you a sense of the costs that are coming down. And so now that drone, our heavy lift drone can, even our 3XL can easily pick that LiDAR system and perform the functions that a helicopter used to perform. So you can immediately start to see the cost savings. But again, it's really the data that you collect is just so important that we built our own system so that we can assure our customers that they've got full end-to-end data security on it. So we're in partnership with a company out of Texas, Cold Chain Delivery Systems, and we are standing up DFR systems for the EMS in Texas. And so what this means is that when a 911 call comes in, typically what happens right now is, trucks roll. What will happen in the future, and what's already now being put in place in select locations, is that a 911 call comes in, trucks roll, and drones fly. And the drone gets there 8 to 12 minutes earlier on average. before the trucks and immediately provide situational overview. And so that would be things like, how many people are hurt, or a crowd, is it violent, what are the traffic conditions, do we need different resources, is it a false alarm? 20% in all the tests over the last 2 years, 20% of all the alarms are false. And so those trucks and resources are immediately turned around. So there's an immediate ROI on DFR because it allows municipalities or districts to be able to, better utilize those resources. We have a second drone that also can fly immediately if there's a need, if the ambulance or the paramedics or the fire trucks can't get there quick enough, and there's a need for like an EpiPen or an AED or something like that, so you can immediately get it there quickly. Or if there's people on the ground that have medical expertise and can administer, emergency life-saving techniques before the paramedics can even get there, we can deploy a second drone instantly as well. So budgets are now being organized for this type of work, and so this is a huge growth area for the drone industry. In terms of some emerging drone technologies, drones are being used more and more in these types of situations. So I can't give specific names right now, but I can tell you that these two use cases here, literally, taking chainsaws up for firefighters, or dropping in fuel or water, or into hotspots, or emergency equipment, or additional shovels, or all kinds of different things, as opposed to having to try to schedule helicopters to get up there, which can take days sometimes, certainly hours, if not, but not like, hey, 15 minutes later that drone's arriving with the proper supplies, or trying to get an ATV up a mountain into those situations. That's an example that 3XL is being used for. Of course, sensing hotspots, using them. These are all things that are really critical in wildfire. They're changing a lot of the standard operating procedures over the coming years because of the introduction of drones. Same thing with search and rescue with drones. This is everything. Getting additional equipment in, doing surveillance, or providing situational awareness, or doing this piece of it. We're providing additional communication or safety measures for the actual search and rescue teams that are going in. So more and more what we're seeing is a search and rescue team might go in and be doing something. Well, they want drones up in the air just for their own safety, right? And to provide situational awareness. So and again, this is just now starting to become part of the standard operating procedure out there. So again, the mission for a drone pilot to fly a wildfire or a search and rescue or a pipeline mission is very different. So we're going to see high specializations in the area, which again is such an exciting emerging career market as well. These are just some of the stats that we're starting to understand, and then how important drones are into this first responder space. So for every minute of saved time in terms of response, we see a 2% increase or a decrease in property damage, and much more importantly, as in the case of things like cardiac arrest, the faster deliveries of critical first aid equipment means improved outcomes, obviously, for that cardiac patient. And so the survival rate drops approximately 1% for every minute lost. So if you're, if you're there, 8 to 12 minutes earlier, you've got an 8 to 12 minute better chance of survival. And I would suggest that it's actually even much better than that because of the quality of equipment and information that you're getting from the drone. So these become immediate type of ROIs that the drone industry is looking at. And it's also why I continue to think that this is where this is the reason that regulation is moving forward. Not so much driven by consumers that want to get a pizza 5 minutes faster or 8 minutes faster or whatever. I mean, that's interesting, but it's not compelling. This is the type of stuff that's compelling, in my opinion. And if we think about career paths in the drone industry, I think these are the career paths that provide great reward and infinite possibility and opportunity. These are just some obvious stats, but you've got a search and rescue team that's walking at 3.2 kilometers an hour, and you've got a drone moving at 70. And that 70 kilometers an hour has got an aerial view and multiple sensors. And so working in conjunction with search and rescue team, drones are just becoming absolutely critical. But again, the best drone pilot in that particular industry or any one of these particular industries is the one that really understands that industry. So you might be a drone pilot, but if you're a drone pilot and you actually understand all the procedures of search and rescue, you've been a search and rescue person in particular situations, and you have that medical background or the emergency response background or whatever the case is, and whatever industry you're in. If you're flying pipelines, but you understand the power industry, or if you're flying pipelines and you understand the pipeline or the oil and gas or the industry, you're going to be a better pilot and in higher demand. And you will, and there's always going to be new sensors coming out. There's always going to be new capabilities coming out. And, so the trajectory and the thinking and the possibilities and the creativity that you can put in to the particular vocation that you choose in the drone industry really is limitless. One of the things that we've been super lucky to be involved with is in support of Ukraine, and so we've done 3 or 4 things there. 2 of note are medical response. So our drones were used by a number of different organizations to fly humanitarian missions into besieged cities. Using that temperature controlled or thermal managed box that I mentioned earlier. And so the primary delivery there was insulin, but there was many other type of emergency medical supplies delivered in as well. The other area that we're very active in the space right now is in landmine detection. And so we're working with several organizations over there, government and NGO, in landmine detection. Also of note, we're doing surveillance and reconnaissance and search and rescue missions. And Ukraine has really been the outlier for the drone industry. So as big as we thought the drone industry was, what Ukraine unfortunately has provided is an incredible test bed and a very blatant use case of how drones have changed the theater of everything from humanitarian through to conflict management. So if we think about conflict management, generally, whoever has air dominance, generally is, certainly has the upper hand. And air dominance has really been the theater of, very rich countries with, multiple platforms, manned systems, billions and billions of dollars invested into them. And what we've seen in Ukraine is that from 10,000 feet down, air dominance is now about small UAS. And anywhere from $1,000 systems up to kind of our sweet spot is at $25,000 to $250,000 systems up to $5 million systems, which are all still very inexpensive systems compared to the larger platforms that we've traditionally seen. And so it's changed the entire tactics and strategy around conflict and or defense. So we see massive budgets now moving into this space. So in terms of career paths and thinking about where the drone industry is going to go, this is just opening up in a massive field. And it seems like every week there's a new innovation or a new use case that's coming up that changes everything. So everything from understanding electronic warfare to search and rescue to surveillance to landmine detection to humanitarian relief to targeting to tactics to patrol support. So, the list just goes on and on. Operating without a drone in any conflict will be kind of like operating, without a rifle. So on that note, that's Draganfly, and that's some of the experience that we've had in the space in the industry, and really going to appreciate the time and opportunity to work with both the University of Maryland and the Frederick Community College. And if there's anything we can ever do to continue to support, we're happy to do so. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. No, the escalation there has happened very, very quickly. So counter drone technology is moving right now. It's moving faster than drone technology, but literally in the next 8 weeks that could change. That's just how quickly it's moving. So electronic warfare is the primary kind of overarching category that counter measures would work in the drone industry. So jamming, spoofing, GPS denial, those types of things are what we're seeing there. So we work with a couple of different countermeasure technologies. One of which we developed worked with a military contractor where we use Kevlar nets to an airbag explosive to shoot out from a drone, capture other drones and take them out of theater. So those are more for individual attacks where it might be a terrorist threat or something like that. We also work with organizations that use electronic warfare, where basically they've got a database of pretty much every drone out there, and they can identify particular signatures, determine if they're friendly or foe, and basically jam those particular drones, or all drones, or just particular specific types of drones up to 20 kilometers away. And so how the drone industry, as opposed to the counter drone industry, is responding to that is by having modulated frequencies, our own jamming antennas and techniques on our drones, continually coming out with new drones that they're not identified on those databases, using more secrecy in order to do that. But ultimately, right now, what's working the best is pilot experience. So being able to move at incredibly fast speeds, incredibly low locations, staying behind obstacles, swarming, spoofing techniques of the drones, understanding the frequencies that are in particular areas. Those are, and a lot of that stuff is just pilot knowledge. And so again, it speaks to the skill of the pilot. Listen, the technology's got to be there, but the skill of the pilot's really making a big difference in those particular areas. But that is a whole new escalated that will never end. Now it's all going to be about drone and counter drone technology at all kinds of levels, like right down to the patrol level, up into that like geographic counter measures. Yeah, so you're so right, Brian. Everything from design to mission planning ends and starts with the battery. That your power source is everything. So I think there's probably three different areas. So if we look at the actual drone design and the efficiency of the drone design, that's a big area. So the 3XL that we just put out this year, that's not a sexy looking drone. That is like a basic. It's the one that's just over my shoulder here. It's a very basic carbon fiber. It's really designed to put sensors on it. It is 100% efficiency, and so people are less and less concerned about anything but efficiency. So that's one area will continue to improve. The other area that will continue to improve that doesn't deal directly with the battery is just basically the infrastructure that's being put in place. So being able to swap batteries quickly, charging stations along the way. So that type of stuff. Now there's also things on some of the larger drones, where they're looking to use hydrogen. We've actually seen quite a strong resurgence in using gas motors and those types of things. But there's all kinds of different challenges with all of them in terms of weight and interference with sensors and heat and a bunch of different things. As it relates specifically to batteries, we have somebody that's what they spend pretty much all their time doing, is just looking for new battery innovation. Who's leading edge? What can we do? What can we incorporate? There's some really cool things coming out. So the use of different materials to store charge, graphene's got a lot of potential. So this will be candidly, it feels like it's stalled out a little bit right now. But there's a lot of people working on it. I think there's going to be some tremendous breakthroughs. And then, of course, all the work that's being done in the EV space, autonomous vehicles and stuff like that. So there's tremendous amount of battery innovation that's happening. And so I don't really, it will always be the limiting factor, because energy and power is always the leader. But I see it becoming less and less of an issue over the coming years.
Yeah, so so we provide training on all the equipment that we sell. We're also currently setting up training academies, in particular in Ukraine. We work with Alabama State University, so they're doing Part 107s right now with us, but we're moving into specific emergency response type of training. We're also working with Texas EMS, in particular Spring Branch, Texas, which is a national training center. And so we're setting up specific curriculum with them. So the answer is it's a little bit sparse right now, but it's expanding very, very rapidly, and certainly not just us that's doing it. For our military clients, we provide extensive training, 1, 3, 5, 10-day courses, scenario analysis. We have a full training center in Texas. We're actually in the midst of getting one set up on the Eastern Seaboard as well, to be able to provide the advanced type of training for all of those different scenarios and all of those different industries. So it's rapidly evolving. Yeah, so, well, I think there's a number of things. So first of all, pilot skill is at the end of the day, there's more and more autonomy, all that type of stuff. So, but the more pilot skill you have, the more options that you're going to have out there, because even when we see very sophisticated environments like Ukraine, it's still the pilot skill that the working knowledge, that type of stuff that makes the real difference. So that's one. And then second of all, the actual industry knowledge that people are going into. So if they have a keen interest, in being a drone pilot, but they really like firefighting, or they really like search and rescue, or they really like marine operations, or they really like the oil and gas, or engineering, or design, or cinematography, being as deep of an expert in that particular space makes you a better pilot, right? So the one thing that I've come to realize over the last number of years is that if you do an incredible job as a pilot, and you get that unbelievable data that your customer or your stakeholder is looking for, it becomes table stakes very quickly. The second that you don't do an amazing job, that's when you get noticed. So because people become it's kind of like your cell phone, like or even like some of the bandwidth challenges that we had here today. Like, we just expect that we should have 99.999% uptime and perfect connectivity, and as long as that's happening, we don't praise it. But the second it's not amazing, that's the issue. So we're definitely, as it relates to pilots, your skill to collect data, your skill to bring relevance of that data, or to be innovative in how you get better and better and better data for your stakeholder, that will be your differentiator.
Cam, that was outstanding. Thank you very, very much.
This is just a presentation on drones in public safety. My name is Justin Baumgartner. I have a PhD in public policy and administration, working for the University of Maryland Global Campus in the public safety division. I'm a retired police sergeant for the Glendale Police Department, which is located in the state of Colorado. And through that time, I've had some pretty good opportunities of creating drone programs, implementing drone programs, and seeing how this can operate within the public safety spectrum. So the drone you see here is the Inspire 1.2, I believe. It was one of the first drones that I utilized in public safety, and I realized very quickly, if you are going to enter into this profession or this field, you shouldn't have a really expensive drone for your first one, because you're going to crash it. So this one, I believe at the time, was between $4,000 to $6,000. The camera itself was rather expensive. And I realized very, very early that if you do not have checklists and you do not have things in place to make sure that all the parts are working, all the parts are attached, in my case, things can go wrong. And when they go wrong, they're catastrophic. And during that time, there was no drone repair shop down the street, so you had to learn how to disassemble, solder, and fix everything on the fly. This guy, unfortunately, I forgot to safely and securely fasten one of the propellers. I launched it for one of the missions for the police department, and 3 out of 4 of them operated correctly. The 4th one came off of the apparatus, it inverted, landed, and that was a very, very expensive mistake. That being the case, we created a lot of policies on how to have proper checklists prior to flight, after flight, making sure that batteries are inserted correctly, that flight time is logged correctly, and we didn't create another catastrophe. You learn pretty quick when you make a mistake to not do it again. So a few applications that we have went through in public safety, specifically within law enforcement, was, for instance, accident reconstruction. We were able to very early on utilize these to create different pictures and views for some of these investigations. You can create these teams, you have them available, they're able to either be sworn or non-sworn personnel, and when events occur, they can launch these devices, have them available, and start creating a 3-dimensional concept of what actually occurred. For jury trials or for after action reports, it's very necessary to have these images. And for instance, one of the first times utilizing this on accident reconstruction, we were able to create a first-person view of what had occurred. So not only can you have the aerial observations, you can put this in the same direction as where the accident occurred, have the pathway resulting in the actual accident, and it does create a 3rd dimension on what had happened that night or that evening. It is one of the many facets that we've utilized drones in public safety, but early on, there were several considerations that you had to think about: flying at night, making sure that you're deconflicting with various other aircrafts, and also making sure that it's safe. One of the first parts of this video actually is stopping traffic to make sure that other oncoming vehicles didn't run into your drone. But when we presented this in front of a jury, they're able to see exactly what happened at that time. For this specific case, there was no impairments. It was just someone that wasn't paying attention. They had to swerve out of the way of a car, and unfortunately, they had to land on the other side of the barrier. Costly mistake, but it didn't actually have to go to trial. From the other applications, there was a fire that occurred in a rural area. This was a oil field fire at a fracking site in Colorado. Again, it gives you a 3rd view, or a higher view of what's going on. This allows to direct apparatus. So you have all your fire trucks. On the bottom right side of the screen, you see the ambulances. You can also see where the police officers were staging, making sure that all personnel were away from the fire itself. But it was an opportunity to create a very proactive communication plan for individuals that were showing up to the scene. Early on, when drones were entering into the profession, you had to go through a very different process. You had to have an actual pilot license, and then this was just a certificate that would attach to your pilot license for you to be able to operate drones in airspace. When I began this process, I thought to myself, yeah, it should be fun to be able to go get a sport pilot license, get in a 2-seater aircraft, and go fly around. I very quickly came to realize I do not enjoy that. Flying in a 2-person Cessna with horrible crosswinds coming off of the mountains here in Colorado is not fun for me specifically. And I had to have a rather odd decision on whether or not this is something that wanted to be pursued. During that time frame, they were able to change the rules and regulations for gaining your license in public safety and in the general public, where you can go through what's called a Part 107 licensure process, and gain that license without having to have the airtime, the actual flight time in the air. I say this because during this process, I had several colleagues saying you are absolutely crazy for wanting to go and get your pilot license just so you can fly around drones. I said, absolutely. By the end of it, they were calling and saying, hey, did you ever get your drone license? Because we have this thing coming up, this community project that we want to have a drone present. We want to have these aerial pictures because we think it's a really good community tie-in. So I said, yes, absolutely. I didn't have to have the flight time. I did not crash any actual airplanes, just one very expensive drone, but I have something to replace it now, and let's go ahead and do this. So the Aurora Police Department in Colorado did a project called Blue Goes Pink. It was in support of breast cancer awareness, and we were able to go out and be a part of this community event and outreach within the network of public safety. There were other concerns, such as flying over people, because there are regulations regarding that. There are regulations on how high you can fly, deconflicting with other aircraft, and making sure that you're not going to put other people in harm's way. However, at a certain layer or level of altitude, you can get these photographs and you can have these events successful because you're angled at a way that you're not directly over. However, you're part of it. So a lot of things that you have to have in play, but it is very successful for what you can incorporate it in within public safety. Thinking outside of the box was how to kind of get the buy-in from the community, buy-in from the administration. I came from a very interesting public safety organization who wanted to make sure that we weren't going too far for a Big Brother-esque mentality, that we're not having cameras out in the public that are just following people around, which we shouldn't be doing. We want to make sure that we're following constitutionality, we're not violating privacy, and that people are still maintaining their rules and regulations. So getting the buy-in from the administration and from the other governmental partners was a little difficult initially, because we wanted to make sure that these things were in place. When we started showing that there was significant impact, such as the community events, the accident reconstruction, and then we started doing these crime prevention and light surveys, we started seeing a lot more value. For instance, what we see here is a nightclub in the city that I was working in. We were seeing criminal activity in a lot of darkened areas. There's an alleyway on the bottom left-hand side of the photograph that had a lot of violent encounters after the nightclub would get out. We were able to go in the middle of the night and take photographs and say, hey, this is the issue, this is the area. And then afterwards, they came in and they installed more lighting. They made it a little bit more accessible for traffic to reduce those that wanted to commit nefarious activity from doing it in the dark. We saw that as well in some of the parks. We went out to the community and we said, why isn't this park being utilized more at night? And they said, well, it's really dark and there are people that are doing things out there in the middle of the night that make us afraid. We don't like to live in this fear-based community, so we're not out there. We don't want to be a part of it, so we don't utilize the park. So we started having more behavior that wasn't tolerated within the community. So we said, hey, how can we make this more accessible? How can we encourage more foot traffic throughout the evening? There were several communities that surrounded this park, and they said, if we just add some more lights to it, if we are able to illuminate where we're going in the middle of the night to let our dogs out, to let our dogs play, to have more community events, we would enjoy this space a little bit more without having to be in fear. So we went out, we took the photographs, we had some very good interdepartmental conversations. We worked with Public Works. They came out, increased lighting, and we actually saw a reduction in crime in this area. It was an out-of-the-box project that was outside of just having a law enforcement agency go out and take photos, but it resulted in more of a community cohesion. And then it came to the one really odd but successful training video that I submitted to the chief of police, and he said, after this, whatever you want, make it happen. And this came to the safety of our first responders when it came to some traffic stops and being able to utilize this technology in the field. This is a video of one of our drive tracks at the time. And we had a conversation of should we be able to throw the drone up and look at one of these activities. So one of the downsides with drones is you don't get audio for the most part, and you wouldn't want to. At this point, you just hear a lot of wind noise. So you're going to have to listen to my commentary of what's occurring. But we were able to create some scenarios where there is something called a felony stop. We would advise the officers that are in the patrol vehicles that the individual driving this white Tesla had just committed a crime to which they're allowed to pursue. So they would be given information via radio that, for instance, the driver of this vehicle had just robbed a bank or committed some other kind of physical harm, so they're allowed to pursue. So this video will show the officers in pursuit, which, by the way, chasing this car usually with a Ford Explorer probably wouldn't be successful, but you know, that's why we have drone operations as well. They will follow it around for quite some time, and then they will order the suspect out. Now, my officer at the time said, why are we flying a drone out during training? And part of this scenario is after someone is ordered out of the vehicle, they're going to be placed under arrest, and then officers have to aggress that vehicle and search it. It is a very dangerous activity because you're going into an unknown. You don't know what else is in that vehicle, and you don't know what else could be occurring. So if we fast forward a little bit more, that suspect has been placed into custody, and they're going to have to start aggressing this vehicle. What we had found was, utilizing this technology, you can begin to search unknown spaces without placing first responders in harm's way. So after this demonstration video was sent to our administration, they said, we will put these devices in areas that we do not want to put officers or first responders because it'll save lives. And as we're looking through this vehicle, you can see that someone is hiding in the back seat. And once they realize that a drone is watching them, I believe he waves to the camera. And that was the selling point. So now they utilize drones to make entry into houses. They use drones to search vehicles, and it became that necessary tool in order to safely conduct some of these operations. A few of the things that we had to consider were policies and procedures. When are you going to deploy assets? Aircraft maintenance and licensing. You do have to have a proper license to be able to fly these aircraft. Privacy issues, again, some of those barriers that we had to have those conversations for. How do you process evidence from drone photographs and videos? How do you store that information? Is there consistent maintenance logs that you have to have in place, because there's only so many hours that you can have on different parts for wear and tear, for batteries? Can you do the community events? Can you show that there is this cross collaboration with other divisions? The training and certification of drone operators. It is very interesting to ask people within organizations to do something that they're not very comfortable with. And then when you tell them that the first thing you did in the division was crash a very expensive one, they say, okay, I'm in. It was always fun. There are different roles and there's different positions you have to have for spotters, for pilots in command, and having that well-rounded team really did create a successful opportunity for this program. I know it was a very high level introduction, but with that in mind, if there's ever any questions, here's my contact information. And do you have any questions? It is a lot of server space, and there was a lot of redundancy. So initially it became very expensive because we were switching out micro SD cards and submitting those into evidence. And then at some point that would be transferred over to the server, and they wanted to keep the hard copy as well. We had individuals from the district attorney's office that would request digital copies, and they're rather large files. So you would actually have to hand over the micro card that it was submitted on. But after a certain point, you had to realize that most flights take well under 15 or even 10 gigabytes of space per each event. So you do not have to go out and buy the 256 gigabyte micro SD cards and utilize those every time. So we had a balance. We had to have some server space affiliated with the converted MP4 files or MP4 files, and then the actual raw footage, because it records in both, we kept as a hard copy at the time. I'm sure things have changed since then, but that was the direction at the time. Honestly, I started 7 or 8 years. I mean, it was right when they introduced the 107. So it could have been 8 years ago. It was recreation for me because I saw this new emerging technology and thought, hey, this could be useful. The initial buy-in from the department wasn't there because it was new and there was a lot of concerns for various things. So I went on my own time and was able to gain the knowledge base. And then once the certification changed, I took it upon myself to get those licensures. The good news is most of the organization now, at least the one that I came from, send people to 107 certification classes to be a part of the division now. But initially it was, this is the up and coming thing. And if you can figure out how it works, maybe you can apply it to the actual public safety organization. I want to say it was probably 8 years ago. Two things: sensors and battery flight time. Those are consistently advancing. When I first started, that very expensive Zenmuse camera barely did 1080p transmission rate, and the photographs were grainy. And when you start going at 400 feet above ground level, you're not getting zoom capabilities. And when you came back, and I can see it on my monitor, very clear image. When I recorded it, it recorded in a very blurry format. And as I continuously transfer the data from one device to another, the corruption on the data was horrific. Now we're looking at 8K cameras that have zero latency and that can fly, 56 minutes for the handhelds, for the commercial off the shelf. Some of the larger drones or the unmanned would be, I think, 18 hours is flight time now. And it's a hybrid between fuel and battery. So the advancement in flight time and what you're actually being able to photograph, record, and zoom are the major advancements. And payload, you can carry a lot more weight than you were initially. The latest and greatest comes out every few months, and it is good and bad. If you're getting previous generation technology, it's great on the wallet, because at some point things advance so fast that you can go back a few generations and get it cheaper or refurbished at a lower cost, especially for the entry level high pilots. The downside is if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest, for instance, in April 2013, a company came out with a drone today that has an 8K camera that can fly for an hour and change, and it has the best advancements when it comes to distance and flying from remote. It's great, but that's another $6,000 apparatus. So the apparatus that I broke when I first started is probably down to $800. The latest and greatest to make sure that you are at the current stage in drone technology is rather expensive, but wait a few months and they'll have a new one. So it just depends on where you want to enter the profession and what the profession demands. There are a lot of things that Generation 1 commercial drones are still very successful with, and then I am very in my world, it is acceptable to in a safe environment crash them and get another one. It's okay to make those mistakes. If you're getting into the more expensive, advanced current technology, hopefully you've had some kind of prior training program to get the proper foundational aspects, so you're not going to be in the same boat that I was. So there are a lot of classes available where you can go out and they will guide you through that information, which is absolutely phenomenal. And I always believe in academic education. There is also the information provided by the FAA that if you wanted to have more of a self-guided pace, you can gain that information and be able to apply for a license, go to a testing facility, take that exam, and you can gain that license independently. It just depends on what kind of learner you are. If you need a little more assistance in that guidance to be able to go through that policy or that procedure, by all means, there are a lot of programs out there to assist you in getting your FAA 107 license, but you can do it independently as well. And there is a balance, because you can be a recreational flyer without having to have a 107 license. That is, you can go and buy a drone off the shelf, and as long as you follow the rules and regulations regarding recreational flight, you can do so without having a professional 107 license. However, if you're utilizing it in the performance of a duty of a job, for instance, working for the campus, taking photographs for the campus for campus purpose utilization, that is a professional licensure, and you need to be licensed with a 107. If you are by yourself and you want to go take some scenic photographs of the ocean or a mountain or whatever brings you that joy, as long as you're following the regulations within the recreational guidelines, you don't have to have that licensure. Public safety, doing it as a member of law enforcement, taking photographs of accident scenes, you need to have the license. Absolutely. And we've seen them for inspections for power lines, power poles, windmills. They don't want to get, you do not want to place a drone too close to one of the wind turbines, or else you have a really expensive mistake. So you can do it from further away, but you can start showing where these problems are without actually having that human exposure for potential detriment. And that's what we're really going for a lot of these drone applications, is not necessarily changing the job profession, meaning that we're going to replace someone in this spot. We want to reduce the harm of potential falls or going into the unknown vehicles or the unknown locations. We want to be able to send these drones in places that we do not want humans to be exposed to the radioactivity. One of the early conversations, there's an Air Force base here in the state, and we had some conversations with their emergency response personnel that if, unfortunately, there are accidents where some aircraft fail to do something and there is either a fuel spill or a wreckage, and instead of sending in, when there's no human life at stake, meaning that there is no direct harm to someone still within that area, you can send in these sensors with these drones to determine the best response without exposing these individuals to these harmful chemicals. So we're getting to a better point here of replacing the hazards that come to the human personnel with robotics and drone applications. Which, by the way, when my chief of police went back to that video and said, you know, the worst thing that can happen is we send a drone into a vehicle, we send a drone into a search warrant residence or a location, and a suspect knocks it out of the sky. We didn't harm humans. And it is so much easier to replace an insured device than we could ever have to replace human life. So it's a game changer. We're changing the way of what we need to utilize technology for the safety of our profession.
Well, that concludes our a lot of lengthy period of time, but we really covered a lot of diverse knowledge, a lot of diverse topics concerning emergent technologies. And as you can see, there's a lot going on out there and there's a lot more to come. Hopefully this will cue your interest in possibly working in different areas of emergency management, or possibly even in the drone area, law enforcement, or intelligence. I want to send a special thanks to Lauren Dodds and to Alan Lyons for their technical support, their patience, their kindness, and their understanding, and to Kathy Francis for partnering with us today and coming up with the original idea to have this. We hope we have the opportunity to do this again. We wish you and your families all the best. Thank you.